ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation History number 39. And this one is the Fabian Society, a wolf in sheep's clothing. And it's mainly, this is going to be mainly Arron Hook stream. As always, to give people time to join us and what have you, I'm going to start us off with a tune.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God's sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threat of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace, fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love and heed and folly, bring all your hopes to naught. Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, a loved Egyptian night? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wail gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly profit laurel, the easy ungrudged praise. Come down to search your manhood through all the thankless years. No age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
And that was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. If you like good music, do go and check out his YouTube channel. And you can also find him on X on Twitter. Okay, good evening to my guests this evening. Arron Hook, and this is mainly going to be Arron's stream, and also Fariam and Mercian. Arron, would you like to take it away, sir?
Yes, of course. So, obviously, the stream we're doing is about the Fabian Society. Did you want to ask a question, Mercian?
Yes. So the first question I'd like to ask. So the Fabian Society is not a secretive organisation, is it? And can we verify all the facts we know about the Fabian Society? If so,
Yes, the Fabian Society has never been a secret society. Since its foundation, it's been very open about what it wants to do. And part of that openness is the fact that they publish pretty much everything they want to do, and so you can go out and find it there. And there's, in fact, the Fabian Society was founded in 1884, and in 1984 they put together a collection of essays about the Fabian Society on its first 100 years, and where they set out everything they did. And so they've always been very open about it, and they've also been very open about their relationship with the Labour Party and their influence there. And also, the Labour Party has always been very open about its involvement with the Fabian Society. So pretty much the history of the Fabian Society is very well documented, both by themselves, by historians of the Labour Party, sort of British political historians in general. If you are aware of the Fabian Society, the idea that it's a secret society seems bizarre because they've always been open from the very beginning.
Mm.
wow, okay.
Yes, we have, there's all the conspiracies about Illuminati and all this lot, but the groups who actually seem to be running things are all quite open. They've got websites and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, if anybody wants to look, you can go on to the Fabian Society, have a website, and they have essentially the history of the organisation, and they sort of describe the foundation and also particularly describe how influential they have been on the Labour Party, particularly. So it's all there in the open if you look, and they are very proud of the fact.
Arron, every Labour Prime Minister, I think, ever has been a member, haven't they?
Yes, starting with Ramsay MacDonald, the first Prime Minister, who was Prime Minister for the first time in 1924. Pretty much all of them have been, I think, I'm not sure about every leader, but certainly every Prime Minister has been, and I think most leaders have been members of the Fabian Society, at least starting with Ramsay MacDonald, maybe one or two before as well.
So, can I ask, how do they get away with it? Does it work the same way when the BBC report on something they don't want to report on? Do they just, is it hidden in plain sight? Do they bury it a little bit, or is it just never appears on anyone's radar and that they're always relying on that?
It's not. It's genuinely not even that. It's not. It's just the fact that if you're somebody who knows about, for example, the history of the Labour Party, it's sort of taken as read that the Fabians are involved. It's the same way as thinking about anything. So I think, it's like saying the British Army is fighting in a campaign in the 1870s. If you know about the British Army, you know that the rifles they will be using will be Martini Henry rifles. It's that sort of thing. It's a part of the furniture almost, if that makes sense. So it's not that it's being hidden or not reporting. It's sort of assuming people who know about it sort of assume everybody knows about it, as it were.
No, I'm thinking about it from a normie context. I think if I spoke to normies about the Fabian Society, I think they'd look at me like I was talking about the Illuminati or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that thing between sort of something being a sort of fact of life for somebody like me who studies sort of British political history and the history of British political parties, whereas somebody who doesn't, and for them it's completely sort of out of the sort of off the wall idea.
I mean, they've been happy being in the background, but they haven't really justified their existence.
Well, no, that's the thing. They've very much been at the forefront.
No, I know, but they don't publicize themselves like, they're sort of going through the Labour Party rather than the other way around, if you know what I mean.
Well, actually, no, they do publicise themselves. They have done. That's the thing. They publicise who they are, and in fact, they are actively involved in senior levels in the Labour Party.
Right. I just mean that they're not like most people have no idea. Most people have never have heard of them. That's all I mean by that kind of.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah, so yeah.
Right. Are there any foreign interests involved with the Fabian Society?
This is the thing. No, this is very much a homegrown British thing. In fact, it's the other way around. The Fabian Society has influenced the outside world, not the other way around. The Fabian Society has had a huge amount of influence on the leaders of a lot of the former British Empire, the former colonies of the British Empire. So Nehru, who was first Prime Minister of India, he was a Fabian. Lee Kuan Yew, the leader of Singapore, was initially a Fabian. And a lot of the leaders of the independence movements were either Fabians or had been educated at places like the LSE, which was founded by the Fabians. So the Fabians have a huge.
That's the London School of Economics, guys.
Yes.
If you don't know what the LSE is, Arron, I think I'm right in saying that the Fabian Society actually predates the Labour Party, doesn't it? Because it was formed in 1884, I think you said, and of course the Labour Party was formed by basically by the Trades Union Congress, and the Trades Union Congress was only established in 1893, and the Labour. The Trades Union Congress was established a bit earlier than that. I think the Labour Party was established in 1893. Is that right?
No. Well, what happened was that the Independent Labour Party was founded in 1893, but that's a separate organisation from the Modern Labour Party. The Modern Labour Party comes into existence technically in 1900 as the Labour Representation Committee, and then in 1906 it becomes the Labour Party. It's the interesting thing is that the Labour Party is founded by a coalition of the labour movement, so the trade unions, but also intellectuals, particularly the Fabian Society. And the Fabians and the trade unions are working, in some cases, quite uncomfortably together throughout the first sort of decade or so. For example, the reason why the Labour Party is called the Labour Party is because the trade unions were really resistant to the idea of calling it a socialist party, because quite a lot of them weren't actually socialist. In fact, they've been very resistant to the idea of having a party at all. They saw that as undermining the labour movement by making it political with a capital P.
Yeah, and of course, traditional trade unions were, in many respects, quite socially conservative.
Oh, yes.
For example, they were very much against mass immigration because they could see it was simply going to lower wages, which of course it does.
Oh, yeah, and they were also very supportive of the British Empire, strongly supportive, partly out of a sort of sense of national pride, but also out of sort of the interest that their industries were an integrated part of the imperial economy, and so they were very much. So the empire is in their interest. So it's not they have an attitude that some people today don't seem to recognise, who seem to think the British Empire is some kind of foreign relief for the upper classes. It wasn't. It was very much something that the working man, both emotionally felt a strong loyalty to, but also had a practical loyalty to. And this was also an element of this feeds into stuff within the Labour Party up until the 50s in their attitude towards the empire, and also that this also feeds into the way the Fabians view the empire up until pretty much Suez.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, I think the Fabians, because they were a group of intellectuals, were less pro-empire than many average British working men were, though. I mean, and as you've pointed out yourself, Arron, people like Nehru were Fabians, and they certainly were not in favour of the British Empire, sadly. But there we go.
Yeah, actually, with the Fabian Society, their attitude towards the empire sort of evolved. So initially, their attitude is, and this is something that comes in the Edwardian era, they view the empire as something that can be reformed into an internationalist body, into a sort of world government. And so they're pushing for sort of reforms within the empire because of that. But then in the interwar period, so that view is very much the first generation of the Fabians. So that would be people like the Webbs and George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells for a short while. But then the second generation, and these are people like Ruth Hindon and Arthur Creech. Let me just make sure I get his name right. Arthur Creech Jones and Ruth Hindon, and also Hugh Gateskill. They actually have quite a traditionalist view of the empire. They have a sort of old-fashioned sort of paternalist view, which was a lot more. This is where the sort of the trade union, the traditional British working class sort of influence seem to influence the trade union, influence the Fabians, where they very much take the view that the empire is something that's generally is a good thing and can produce results. And actually, I actually here can sort of quote something. It's so Ruth Hindon and Arthur Creech Jones sort of found something in the late 30s called the Fabian Colonial Bureau, and this is very influential on the Labour Party's sort of colonial policies throughout the 40s and into the 50s. And there's a conference that takes place in 46 in West Africa, and it's something that is held to sort of talk to the African leaders. And Hindon attends this conference, and I'll just quote it here. At the conference in 1946, Hindon was alarmed to hear Kwame Nkrumah of the Gold Coast, later Ghana, demand immediate independence. She felt that British socialists are not so concerned with the ideals of independence and self-government, but with the ideals of social justice. In other words, independence would be the denial of social justice and human rights. She may have been thinking about the effects of tribal rivalries and ideological differences, or communist influence might result in a one-party state. So there's very much an element of a sort of, so with the Fabian Society at this point, a sort of socialist reading of the white man's burden in a way, and so that sort of dominates Fabian Society thinking and in turn Labour Party thinking up until Suez. And it's Suez, as with quite a lot of things in British politics when it comes to the empire post-war, that's sort of where they change and they become very much in favour of decolonisation.
What one of the things you said there, you mentioned like social justice, and we think of that as a very modern term, but a lot of these stupid ideas that are now just ruining the modern world, they go back quite a way, really, to all these sorts of people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A lot of these ideas, and particularly that idea of social justice, is something that people like to associate it as being Marxist, but fundamentally it's more Fabian socialist. And wait a second, the Fabian socialism is not Marxist; it's not communist. And the reason I say that is because just to give a bit of history about socialism itself before you get to the Fabians. Socialism, sort of, at least very much in this country, is a mixture of sort of 17th century and 18th century radicalism. So in the 17th century, you've got things like the Diggers and I forgot his name now. The Diggers and
the Levelers.
Yes. And so that, yeah. So then you've got Thomas Paine and Thomas Spencer, who sort of radicals in the 18th century. Spencer's advocating common ownership of land, and Thomas Paine's obviously advocating the stuff that Thomas Paine did. And then in the 19th century, you have sort of two important movements. Yeah, first, utopian socialists. These are socialists that come before Marx. So these are operating in the late 18th century into the first half of the 19th century. The most notable of them being Robert Owen, who gives his name to Owenite socialism. And this is the idea of common ownership of land, a sort of co-op, imagine sort of the co-op, but on a sort of societal level. And that's a sort of Owenite socialism. And that is, importantly, they do not believe in sort of class conflict. So they don't think there's going to be some kind of sort of class warfare in the way that Marxists do. And in fact, Marxists are quite critical of people like Owen and the other sort of utopian socialists. They regard them as bourgeois, as middle class, as unwilling to deal with what they regard as the quote-unquote proper sort of issues in society. regard using sort of revolutionary means. And those criticisms that Marx and Engels make against utopian socialists are arguments that people like Lenin and Trotsky make against the Fabian Society in the early 1920s. And it's also the arguments that people like H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw will use against the Fabian Society when they sort of go off the Fabians during the sort of 19-teens and into the 1920s. So Marxism then comes along in 1848, and that very much sets up a revolutionary path to socialism. And from the 1840s to the 1870s, there is a divide develops in socialism between the sort of revolutionary path, down which you have Marxism, communism, anarchism, and then you have the other one of social democracy, democratic socialism, and eventually in the 1880s, Fabian socialism through the Fabian Society. And so Fabianism is very much its own thing and something separate from Marxism and from communism. And it's and they importantly, as I think it's been previously mentioned, they are not revolutionary. They are adamantly opposed to revolution. They are in favour of reform. They are reformist socialism, which is what the name given to what they are. So they want to do things gradually. They want to do things via parliament, via the law. They are not going to overturn society by a mob overthrowing the government. And that's something.
Arron, where do radical MPs like Cobden and Bright fit into this from the early mid-19th century?
Oh well, they actually. Thank you. Glad you mentioned that, Duke. I should have mentioned another group there. The other group that's operating in the 19th century, which Cobden and Bright are both part of, is the Chartists, and they're calling for the expansion of the vote, and that's really where the modern trade union movement comes from. And so that's also something that the Fabians are drawing on. So Cobden and Bright are very much in the Whig Liberal Party, and that sort of liberalism, free trade. So the Fabians have always been in favour of free trade, and that comes directly from that liberal tradition that you get Bright and Cobden representing. So the Chartists are also involved in the Anti-Corn Law League that sort of supports the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846, and so that's that strain of sort of free trade and the idea that free trade will set people free is very much a part of the Fabian Society. That's thinking.
Cool. So who initially set them up, Arron, and what was their stated purpose for doing so, and all that kind of stuff?
Right. Well, the interesting thing about the Fabian Society is it doesn't actually begin on its own. It starts out as a branch of another organisation called the Fellowship of the New Life, and this is a sort of it's not an explicitly political organisation. It's one that advocates vegetarianism, simple living, sort of the stuff that Leo Tolstoy was in favour of, and they take a view that if you're going to reform society, you need to reform the individual, and the individual you need to start with is yourself. And so it goes from there. Now the Fabians start out as a particular branch of this society, of this organisation, and they then that society comes into existence in 1883, and the Fabians come into existence themselves in January 1884. And the initial founders are, and Mitch has mentioned them, and they are the two big beasts of the first generation of the Fabian Society, Sidney and Beatrice Webb. They are the movers and shakers. They not only are the big people who found the Fabian Society, they helped found the Labour Party in 1906, and importantly, Sidney Webb is one of the many co-authors the Labour Party constitution in 1918, and he also serves as a cabinet minister. He was. Let me just double check here. He was. Here we go. So he was Secretary of State for the Colonies and Secretary of State for Dominion Affairs in the second Labour government. So he's overseeing colonial policy in that government, and he sets he sort of sets the tone for a degree of colonial policy through that government and into the national government. And so certain reforms would take place during that time. Now, other members are Frank Podmore, and Frank Podmore is probably most famous because he is the man who suggests the Fabian Society adopt the wolf in sheep's clothing, because he suggests the group should be named after a Roman general called Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosius. I believe that's yes. And he said that the Fabian Society should adopt Fabius's strategy in defeating Hannibal, sort of avoid pitched battles and take things and sort of gradually take on what they want to achieve. And so that's where the name comes from. And I honestly don't think with Frank Podmore or the rest of the Fabians, they're intending to be sort of sinister with that. They were for them. These are obviously people who, all of whom have been classically educated. They know about ancient Roman Greece and they know the classical canon. So I think in that they are just making a classical reference with that. I don't think there's any intention to be sinister there, even though that's sort of what people think now. And I've briefly mentioned it before. George Bernard Shaw is a founder. He's a founding member. And H.G. Wells goes on to join them in the Edwardian era. Now, during the 1880s and 1890s, the Fabians are very much focused on doing sort of social reform work. They're looking at this, so they're doing sort of surveys into how many poor people there are in London, for example. Beatrice Webb's cousin, I believe, was Charles Booth, who writes the very famous report that then gets pushed to publish as a book called Labour and Life in London for the London Poor in, I think, 1902, which is very, very influential on sort of social reform in London.
That's London Labour and the London Poor, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah. And that is a big sort of classic in sort of social reform literature at the time.
One thing, that Society of Simple Living you mentioned,
yeah,
were the Quakers involved in that? Because that sounds like a Quaker thing.
I think they may be, but yeah, you're right. It does sound like their sort of thing. Yeah. One of the.
It also sounds like something that Morris, the designer guy, might have supported as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think he was himself involved, and I know he certainly influenced quite a few of the influenced Fabians, and a lot more the second generation than the first. So William Morris, obviously, Duke Remington was a big designer. He's also, interestingly, one of the founders of the fantasy genre in books. So he's a big.
If you want to know something about William Morris, Lady Charlotte had a really good. She did a good video on William Morris.
Yeah, and he's a big sort of influence on the fantasy genre. So he influences both J.R. Tolkien and Robert E. Howard. But also he's very involved in sort of socialist organisations during the 1860s and 1870s. And he sort of influences the Fabian Society. I think he dies. I don't think he died the year it was founded, but he died not long after. But he's certainly influential on the first generation to a degree, and also the second generation, particularly with G.H. Cole, who I'll come to. But actually, at this point, I just wanted to read something just to give you a general idea of what the political state, I think, was like on the left in Britain around the time the Fabian Society was founded. So just bear with me a second. So this is from a book called called The Labour Party, it was actually written in 1949 by a serving Labour MP called William Glenville Hall, who was also a serving minister. And this was written as a part of a series called Britain in Pictures, which just sort of covers all the British public life. And they did 3 volumes on the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and this one, the Labour Party. So let me just get it here. So, to the onlooker at the time, the stage appeared set for the permanent alliance, even integration of the direct representatives of Labour, that's the Labour movement, with the Liberal Party in the House of Commons. This view was illusory. Startling social theories were in the air. A fresh militancy was arriving in the unions. More aggressive leaders were entering the lists, challenging the Gladstonian gospel and saying bluntly that another and complete independent party was essential if the masses were ever to obtain social justice. In 1881, the Democratic, later Social Democratic Federation had been founded by H.M. Hindman, a burly, bearded, silk-hatted, frock-coated figure, apparently embittered, so his enemies, and there were many, asserted because his father had left most of his fortune to the building of churches. Hindman had come under the influence and accepted the teachings of Karl Marx, an individual of great erudition and a beaver-like acidity. Though safely tucked away these many years in Highgate Cemetery, his works have unfortunately lived after him and cast a gigantic shadow over the minds of the countless people then unborn. The SDF published a pamphlet, Socialism Made Plain, the aim of which was to show the private ownership of the means of production, exchange and distribution was the cause of poverty, and followed this up with a broadside by the weekly issue of Justice, a periodical magazine, preaching the same doctrine. William Morris, the poet and craftsman, was for a time, until he broke away and formed the Socialist League, a distinguished member of the organisation. The Federation was thus the first socialist society to arrive in the country. It was, however, uncompromisingly Marxian, a creed which was never appealed strongly to the British people. It was followed in 1884 by the Fabian Society, composed overwhelmingly by middle and upper middle class intellectuals. The Fabian Society sought to influence the public, particularly representatives on local and national authorities, by giving lectures and issuing pamphlets. These publications gave socialists the first time up-to-date facts about social conditions and provided them in the Fabian essays, brilliantly written by the brilliant team of Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb, with a reasoned basis, economic and ethical, for their beliefs. And so that's very much the sort of mould they're moving in. The Marxists are active, but they have no support, pretty much. And the Fabian Society are coming in here, and they come into a place where there's a space for them on the left, and there's a space for them in sort of influencing things, especially about the Liberal Party.
Arron, sorry to interrupt you, but I know that in the 1880s there were various socialist clubs in London, for example, but they were almost invariably patronised by Jewish immigrants for the most part. They're not by British workers at all, really.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, socialism. Anything called socialist up until pretty much the 1880s, with things like the Social Democratic Federation and then the Fabian Society, was associated more broadly. If it wasn't, if it had association, obviously, in the first half of the century with Robert Owen and elements of the Chartist, but by then it was seen as sort of a sort of foreign thing. Interestingly, it was seen as a middle class thing as well. During the sort of 1860s and 1870s, when you had the first international involving Marx and Engels and Annie Besant, who's also a founder of involved in the foundation of the Fabian Society, there's a distinction made between socialism, which is a middle class sort of social reforming idea, and communism, which is a working class movement. And so it was seen as slightly disreputable and somewhat foreign, and so that changes.
How much influence did the Fabians have with the Liberal Party in the 1880s and early 1890s?
Well, they actually start to grow in influence because obviously Gladstone has been sort of the towering figure in the sort of Liberal Party at this point for pretty much going on 40 years. But there's a new generation coming up. So these are people like Lloyd George, Asquith, and the sort of older generation, people like, what's his name now? Sir William Hartington, who's sort of a part of the Gladstone generation. And they're advocating, instead of sort of the hands-off classical liberalism of Gladstonian liberalism, they're more the interventionist, liberals advocating what then was called new liberalism, or what becomes sort of social liberalism. So this is the sort of liberal policy which was social reforming that would bring about, say, in the Astley government, the things like the old age pension, the national insurance, and the establishment of what are now called job centres, what are called what were known as labour exchanges when they were founded. And this has very much influenced, these people are being influenced by sort of the publications that the Fabian Society is putting out, because they are doing these sort of, they're doing this research into the conditions that people are living in, and they are putting it out. And they're also working with people like the Rowntree Foundation, who of course are very famous for Rowntree family who owned Cadbury's at the time, and they are social reformers.
More Quakers as well, I believe, aren't they?
Yes, very much so.
You can always name the Quaker.
Yeah. Yeah. It's either the Quakers or the Methodists.
Yeah, I don't want this to be too much of a tangent, but I hear Ed Dutton constantly going about the Quakers. What's the whole Quaker question? Is there a way any of you can sum that up within a minute or less?
Oh, I'll give it a go if you wish.
Go on, AI. Go for it.
I mean, they are take the worst part of Christian morality. You know, if you look at like a barometer of Christianity, and you can draw
the gayest part of Christian morality.
It basically is not. It's the criticism of Christianity is that it's a slave religion. It promotes weakness, patheticness, and also there is an aspect of Christianity which is actually quite masculine and assertive, and virile and violent as well. Particularly if you look at the way that Christianity was during, let's say, Crusades or what have you. So there's a barometer of it. The Quakers, they take the Christian morality and basically bend it into a slavish, self-hating, and I would say, in any normal society, they would just be outlawed immediately and persecuted and crucified. In any normal society, the fact that they have allowed to be permanent.
Hang on, I mean, this is part of the reason why so many Puritans pissed off to America. Is they were persecuted to some degree, and quite rightly, in my opinion. But
I mean, the thing though is, and I'm not a Roman Catholic, but when you listen to various bishops and church fathers over the centuries, when they say we must be orthodox, we must be strict in our teachings, and we must be limited, because otherwise heresy will spring up and you'll have all sorts of problems. I mean, this is why. Is when you and this is a problem with the Protestant Reformation. This one massive big problem is it created this vacuum of of individuals who basically corrupted Christianity, and the Catholics were right about it. I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, this will be very unpopular. This may be unpopular for others, but there has been problems. Now, you can say, well, with England, it was the Anglican Church in that time wasn't extreme, and that's true. And you can look at the Calvinists in Scotland or what have you. But the Quakers themselves, quite frankly, I mean, they're not even really Christian. If I'm absolutely honest, they don't really even follow any sort of strict core tenets or anything. But what they do is they just take the victimhood thing and run with it, to the hills, as I think Arron and others have talked about up till now.
Well, Arron has been saying that the Quakers were quite heavily involved in the forming of the Fabian Society. Is that all right, Arron?
Yeah, they were very much influential. Actually, to give people a sort of idea about the Quakers, the historian David Stark, his mother was a Quaker, and he occasionally used to attend their sort of meetings, and he said the way it used to work is you'd stand up and you'd speak as if the Spirit would take you, or the Spirit.
Yeah, they call it like being guided by your inner light or something.
Yes, and David Stark, he always said that it was interesting that the inner light always seemed to have read that morning's Guardian when they spoke. So that gives you an idea about the sort of the politics of the Quakers.
I mean, there's a Quaker Hall not too far from myself, and as you can imagine, recently they've been promoting a lot of green agenda. That's like the hot topic, and I'm guessing it's like a surrogacy for the Green Party in that I've noted across, and it's not just where I am. I've noticed that the Quakers at large have been. There's a lot of Quakers within the Bristol Green movement, for example.
Yeah, and the for example, the Roundtree Institute, which the Roundtree family is involved in, they've been heavily influential on the Liberals and then Lib Dems since the 1970s. So if some of you might remember, during the coalition, there was a Lib Dem peer called Oakeshott. He started his career as a researcher for the Roundtree Institute, one of the Liberals' so-called, Roundtree Liberals' so-called chocolate soldiers.
Arron Hook, isn't the Young Fabians that's like the under 30 section for the Fabian Society? Are they? They are still an affiliate of the Labour Party, the official Labour Party.
Oh yes, and the Fabian Society itself still is.
Are they still? Yeah, they are still affiliates. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Hootier Keir Starmer is a Fabian.
Yes, in fact, when he oh sorry.
I was going to say, Tony Blair is a Fabian as well, isn't he? Yeah.
I thought they were Fabians. I don't think Keir Starmer's an active member at the moment. But
yeah, he is. Yeah, no,
he's the active member.
He's a member of the Fabian Society. So was Tony Blair. As somebody said, that Us, who is the London mayor, I think he's a Fabian. Basically, anyone of influence on the left in Britain is a Fabian. Arron, one of the things I wanted to ask you: have any Conservatives been members of the Fabian Society?
Not that I can think. Not that I can think.
Just so I can go.
They did try to create. There was an attempt to create a Conservative Fabians in the 1930s.
Yes. Yeah.
I do know of that. Actually, do you know who I think was a Conservative Party member and joined before he defected? Was John Bercow. Or he was. I think he was. I mean, I know he was Speaker technically,
the very corrupt former Speaker of the House of Commons, by the way, for anyone in the chat who doesn't know who John Bercow was.
Yeah, I believe he was. I mean, he was a Tory, then Speaker, and then joined Labour and the Fabian Society. So that's the only person I can really think of, to be honest.
Yeah,
I do. Sorry, I was going to say I do view. You're never really a former member of the Fabian Society. You know, you're always there. You never really leave with some of these people.
Yeah, and actually,
yes. I was going to say, maybe you just don't go to as many meetings as you used to.
Yeah, you just zoom into them instead. Yeah.
Actually, a man who was a member of the Fabian Society, arguably, you can say his membership really did influence his sort of the way he turned afterwards, was Oswald Mosley. When he leaves the Tory party and then eventually joins the Labour Party, he joins the Fabian Society, and he's very active. And when his Mosley memorandum, the one advocating essentially proto-Keynesian economics, right, it gets the endorsement of quite a few members of the Fabian Society. And
one critic of the Fabian Society from the left is George Galloway. He is a very strong critic. I remember one of his main criticisms was the failure for the Fabian Society to support the Easter uprising of 1916.
Yes, the Fabians very much took the idea that was that Irish independence was non-socialist at best and anti-socialist at worst.
For anyone who's interested in this subject, Arron and I did a stream on basically Irish independence and Ulster, which you can find. I can't remember what we called it now, Arron. But if you want to look at some of that stuff, go and look at that stream. And the early Irish nationalists were a bit fashy, to be honest. Not at all these days, of course. These days they're in favour of 1 million Bomalians in Ireland, or 2 million Bomalians. But back in the day, the early Irish nationalists were actually a bit fashy. They were fairly right-wing. They weren't left-wing for the most part.
Well, they got co-opted by the the sort of liberal, and that's one thing you notice with a lot of these, particularly in the last century, a lot of these revolutionary movements, they get co-opted by the establishment of the day. And I do wonder, does Sinn Féin, current Sinn Féin of today, have any connections with the Fabian Society?
I don't believe so. That would be something that the Fabians would be very resistant to be involved. They've always been, when it comes to Irish republicanism, deeply, at the best, sceptical. And there may be some connections post 97, but traditionally, before sort of Blair becomes leader in Labour, the Fabian Society wouldn't have had anything to do with Sinn Féin or the IRA. It would have been.
I know that the Fabian Society has. Sorry,
I was just going to say, Sinn Féin is basically, they come from Marxist roots, and as Arron was saying earlier on, the Fabians are not Marxists.
Maybe I think the Fabian Society does have connections with the in Northern Ireland, the SDLP, which is the nationalist the nationalist socialist, not National Socialist, but nationalist, Irish nationalist and socialist political party, which is basically like a weaker version. Well, it's a weaker version of Sinn Féin.
It's a sort of, they're constitutional nationalists, so they completely reject violence, and they are fundamentally a sort of a proper sort of. They are not Marxist; they're a socialist organisation. So they, for example, in opposition, their MPs sit with the Labour Party, and so that with that particular party, they have had, the Fabian Society has been involved, has had connections with them. But when it comes to sort of physical force nationalism, so particularly sort of Irish republicanism of sort of Sinn Féin and the various forms of the IRA, the Fabians wouldn't go anywhere near that. That's explicitly revolutionary, and they are not revolutionary.
Right then, can I ask, how does the modern Fabian Society differ from its foundation? Has it changed any of its beliefs, or?
Yeah, the Fabian Society during the first half of the 20th century it's very much obviously focused on social reform, but the interwar period, the second generation sort of takes over from the first to a degree, the first generation. You particularly having this R.H. Tawney and G.D.H. Cole. They are two second generation Fabians. They're both academics. They're both involved in. So Tawney's particularly involved in doing bits of advising British government. So he's on the Sankey Commission that advises the government to nationalise the mines in 1919, which Lloyd George refuses to do. And he writes various sort of papers on education. So he does a paper for the Fabians in the mid-20s advocating for universal secondary education, and then writes a paper for the Labour Party calling for for our health policy, and that essentially is combined with beverages, with the beverage board. Interestingly, William Beveridge, who wrote that, was Tawney's friend, and also the Tory plan at the end of the Second World War for health service. And actually, Mitch is quite right. That was where Sidney Webb did write Clause 4, and that's an important part of it. The idea of nationalising the industries, that changes in the 50s. The Fabians regard that as no longer useful. And a big sort of the big influential book on this is written by Gateskill. Now, Hugh Gateskill becomes leader of the Labour Party in 1955. He succeeds Attlee. He is a student of G.D.H. Cole, and he has also studied under Tawney. So he's heavily influenced by these two men. And they sort of completely, they are both anti-Soviet in a way that the Webbs weren't. The Webbs famously wrote a book in the 30s called I think it's called The Soviet Union as Civilization. The first version, the first edition had a question mark, and the second edition didn't, because they clearly, the second edition decided it was, and so they become very pro. They're very interested in they're essentially doing their useful idiots for the Soviet Union, much to the chagrin of their son Malcolm Muggeridge, their son-in-law Malcolm Muggeridge, who is one of the journalists who, along with Gareth Jones, exposed Holodomor in 1933, and the Webbs loathe him for this, to the degree that Malcolm Muggeridge once told Richard Ingrams, the founding editor of Private Eye, that he suspected that if there was a revolution, the Webbs would quite happily have had him shot. He displeased them that much.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Malcolm Muggeridge was on pretty much every Sunday in the 1970s and what have you. Like I can vaguely remember him when I was a little boy. But yeah, Arron, Dan Buckley is saying it seems that many of the media are related to the Fabian Society, and he mentions Dan Snow, etc. Is it true? I would imagine there would be lots of lefty media people involved.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know if this particularly if Dan Snow is involved with them, but if he is, it would not surprise me. Again, sorry.
I was just going to say, Dan Snow is. There's, I think, the current vice president is an author, and worked. I think that the chairman worked on the BBC production house, like the actual people who produce BBC productions, TV shows and what have you. I mean, so there's a very close connection with the people. If you go into the BBC, it's not that difficult to get involved within the Fabian Society after you quote unquote leave. I say quote unquote because, and let's be honest, there are people who are employed at the BBC who probably are actively working alongside, probably even with various productions, whether it be a documentary or something like that. But may even have a Fabian Society research or some sort of citation in there.
Yeah, I should just say Loafer. That's a chap. Yes, that's him.
One question I do have, Arron, is I was recently rewatching the Adam Curtis documentary 2002 Century of the South, and it was looking at Edward Bernays, and his the legacy of his I think was it double great uncle Sigmund Freud, and looking at things like public relation and how the psychologist field, from sort of the sort of socialist, from one end of Marxist end, but also other more socialist ends, like Trotsky sort of socialist ends, deconstructed, the Western man, looking at ways to prevent another Hitler. Effectively, I think that was the word that Edward Bernays used. They wanted to find ways to avoid another Hitler, and it's basically creating a society where all those, what led up to it could never happen again. Was the Fabian Society involved in that involved with Edward Bernays at all, or people like him, or were they just, just sort of became part of the, that sort of movement anyway by sort of natural affiliation?
Oh, it was very much a natural evolution that way, and that the big change comes in the 50s when Gaitskell becomes leader, because he brings in he's by that point got a group of I should say in 1945 I think it was 120 Labour MPs were members of the Fabian Society, including obviously Clement Attlee, the leader and Prime Minister, and that they are Gaitskell is one of them, and they all start writing to the party under Attlee and into the 50s, and so among people who among sort of, and in this process was that sort of 10 years, Roy Jenkins has become a Labour MP, and he is Gaitskell's, one of Gaitskell's protege. Another protege of Gaitskell is Anthony Crossland, and Anthony Crossland is very much AI. It comes to that position, evolutionary.
Author of the Crossland Diaries, of course, which many.
That's a different bloke. That's a Richard
Crossland. Oh, is
Crossland.
that a different Crossland?
Yeah, Richard Crossland. Yeah. You had Richard Crossland who wrote the diaries, and Anthony Crossland who did the grammar school, who did in all the grammar schools. And now, what Crossland does in 1959, he publishes a book which I think he publishes through the Fabian Society called "The Future of Socialism," where he essentially says, right, all the sort of economic stuff we've got to put aside. That's not going to bring about social reform, because we've brought about affluence. The 50s is a definite decade. Things are getting better. Now we must focus very much on the real sort of social and cultural side. And so that's a text that sort of changes the Fabian Society and the Labour Party. So you go very much from the economic justice, very much the sort of trade union side of the Labour Party, into the sort of social justice, cultural change, sort of cultural liberalism that you get with particularly Roy Jenkins as Home Secretary in the 60s.
Arron, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions in a minute, and just to say to the other guests, if you've got a question, please jump in. I just want to do a little tiny bit of admin first, and also to say to Low for Sheffield, before you joined the chat, Low for Sheffield, Arron actually pointed out the LSE, the London School of Economics, was pretty much founded by the Fabian Society. And the London School of Economics, for anyone who doesn't know, is a very lefty economic organisation, or lefty globalist, I think is what you really call it. But I wanted to do a bit of channel admin because we're almost at an hour. Guys, if you want to support the channel, you can do so via Entropy. The link is pinned at the top of the chat. And you can also, if you want, ask Super Chat questions via Entropy. We do actually already have one. And towards the end of the stream, I will read those out. Arron, before we go a bit further on this, and I think I was right what I said about the LSE, it was largely a Fabian Society organisation. But how involved were the Fabians with mass immigration, for example? How much did they approve of that stuff in later years, rather than like in the 1880s, obviously?
Yeah, I mean, very much in the sort of 50s and 60s, when sort of Gaitskell comes in, and you bring in people like Crossland and Jenkins, they become very much more immigration becomes something that they're relaxed about. They regard it as not a bad thing, and their reasoning for it is because after Suez, the attitude towards the empire goes from, right, we can't hold on to the empire because of what the Americans have done to us, but we must try and keep the Commonwealth together. And so they are relaxed about immigration because they don't think it's going to be a bad thing, but also they're doing it for Commonwealth unity. So they think if you put immigration controls on, you will have sort of large swaths of sort of the African and Asian members of the Commonwealth will just leave, and this is so they are.
And they didn't think that was a good thing.
Oh no!
Though I should say in that that was also a concern. That issue about the Commonwealth was also a concern with the Conservative governments in the 50s. The Alan Lennox Boyd, who was Colonial Secretary in the mid to late 50s, he he's in favour of immigration controls, but he does say to his colleagues in cabinet, right, if you bring immigration controls, you can either have immigration controls and lose Commonwealth unity, or you can have Commonwealth unity and no immigration controls, but you can't do both.
So how about immigration controls and just keep Commonwealth unity with the old Commonwealth, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day, South Africa. That's the only bit that was worth keeping unity with anyway.
Yeah.
But Iron Duke, the curry shops, come on.
I actually saw someone putting up on X yesterday, I think it was, putting up that British people are still eating World War II food. No wonder we love curry. Why you need immigration to cook curry, I don't know, but there you go. Whatever.
We got the recipe now.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of going off topic, but I remember John Dee sort of saying we've lost a lot of recipes since World War II.
Yeah. The Second World War hammered. It was just butchered British cooking because it went from having ingredients to, well, what can I do with a bit of bread, basically.
Very true. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, people don't realise how bad rationing was in Britain in World War II, and it continued into the 1950s.
Yep, some bread and sausage that's mostly sawdust.
Yeah. My father, when he went into the army in 1951, Britain still had rationing on things like sweets. What the Americans call candy, but we call sweets. That was still rationed when my dad went into the army in 1951.
Yeah. A lot of people assume it just ended after the war. Nope.
No,
a lot longer.
It's why sugar puffs are called sugar puffs, because sugar was such a luxury item. Any more questions for anyone?
No.
I've got
this.
I've got this one video of Bernard Shaw talking, and it's if you can share that, Iron Duke, my screen there. Yeah, this feels like him kind of giving away the plan.
I object to all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be of very much use to you.
That's a lot of dead socialists.
Yeah. But it's I
agree with him. I mean, yeah, we should get rid of the dregs of society, and it follows by people who follow you, you stupid old fuck.
Yeah.
Well, the well-known Irish writer George Bernard Shaw, but yeah. I don't think that Aaron's going to totally agree with that, because I believe by the time this bit of film was posted, George Bernard Shaw had kind of parted ways with the Fabians, hadn't he, Aaron?
Yeah, in fact, he essentially started drifting away from them before the First World War. He left the Fabian Society's executive in about 1911. And one thing that people all rightly know about Bernard Shaw is that from the sort of 1917 onwards, he's very sympathetic towards the Soviets. He is also quite sympathetic towards Italian fascism, Mussolini, and in the 30s, he's somewhat sympathetic towards, simultaneously, with the National Socialists in Germany, and he says quite nice things about Hitler. He was interested. He himself was interested in sort of dictatorial elements. That's and the Webs with that books that Mitch mentioned, the title Mitch mentioned, Soviet Communism, a Civilization. They were, but by that point within the Fabian Society, people like G.D.H. Cole and R.H. Tawney are very sort of anti-Soviet, anti-communist. So,
and of course, Arron has already mentioned that Oswald Mosley of the British Union of Fascists was a Fabian.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it's
is it more of a like a difference about how we get there rather than the end goal?
To a degree, in the 30s, it was the sort of end goal of a sort of egalitarian society without class differences, and sort of the ownership of the means of ownership in the hands of the workers was something that people like Cole and H.G. Tawney wanted, but they were absolutely opposed to the sort of Soviet methods. Full stop. That stuff that what Shaw said was something that they would have been wholly opposed to. I've no doubt they were horrified by it when they heard it. So it's and it's certainly not true for a later generation of Fabians. So the sort of Gateskill, Jenkins, Croston generation, they didn't even they very much had gone past that idea of economic controls, sort of Soviet style. They were completely opposed to that, and so it is no way to reach the sort of social reform and better society that they wanted.
What's quite interesting with this, Arron, is when I was reading, I was like reading a bit into Evelyn, particularly his time and his sort of criticisms of the fascist movement in Italy from the right, from like a right wing perspective, let's say, and even National Socialism in Germany. Very critical of those, and he wasn't. He was affiliated with more with the earlier forms of fascism, not towards the later stages, and that's what gets him off on the trial. But what's quite interesting is he does point out, and he does say, he criticizes them from the point of they're too egalitarian. They're not elitist enough. They're not focusing on some sort of ancient hierarchical order that you'd see sort of like in pre-Enlightenment stuff. And what's quite interesting when you when you look at the National Socialist movement or fascism, you can see why maybe some particular individual who flirts with the Bolshevik movement and sort of Stalin and stuff can actually jump, but on paper you think, oh, this is a bit of a schizo move by him, but actually there is like a strange sort of logic to it. Yes.
Well, look at Mussolini. Mussolini went from being a socialist, if not a Marxist, to fascism. You can certainly jump between those. It's perfectly possible to do it. I just wanted to ask Arron, because Dan Buckley in the chat is asking, was Toynbee a Fabian?
I don't actually know, because he was involved. He was in the liberal side of things, so I don't know if he was in. He was. He could have been later on, possibly. I know that. I think his granddaughter Polly Toynbee. I think he is with the Fabian Society. I'm not quite sure. I know his son Philip wouldn't have been, because he was a communist. And I say I don't mean that in a derogative way. I mean he was a card-carrying member of the British Communist Party. But I don't know if he was.
That is pejorative, but
I don't think he was, but I know Polly Toynbee is a member of the Fabian Society. Yeah.
And just to go back to what AI was saying, that bit of fascism and Nazism having egalitarian elements to it. That's absolutely true. Within their own sort of ideological framework, they are very egalitarian, and
they promote it.
Yes,
they actively promote it as well. And that's when 'cause I remember Eveler, he was invited to various SS meetings, round in Austria and in southern Germany, and he was saying, listen, you cannot be, having this sort of mass movement of basically like a populist movement, because it kind of was in that with German nationalism, and be this egalitarian. It has to be elitist because of what you're going to be ruling over, not just German people. And everything, you need to have some sort of hierarchy. Is basically like what the argument was, and there were a lot of individual people in the SS who agree with him, but largely he was drowned out by the National Socialist establishment in Germany.
William Grenville, I was reading a book, I don't know, a month ago now, about a Dutch guy who volunteered for the SS in World War II. And he points out that in the German army, traditionally, you would refer to your lieutenant, for example, as Herr Lieutenant, yeah?
Yeah.
So Mr. Lieutenant, I guess it would be the closest British equivalent. But but in the SS, you didn't do that. You just used their rank. There was no Mr. this or anything.
Yeah, and also there were multiple, like, the Belgians who joined, the SS or the various sort of German legions. A lot of them did it for Catholicism, like some sort of Catholic Christian nationalist reasons. So it was kind of it was very much it was kind of like, I mean, I don't want to be like, comparing it to any sort of modern political movement, but when you have like these various different reasons for different groups, and you have like this coalition, like this political coalition, it's kind of what you saw there, particularly with in that, and that was what Eveler and people, critics from the right wing perspective on National Socialism, which you can draw on, is that it was egalitarian at its heart. It was, and it. Yeah, and then this is why you have sort of like these strange, sort of figures who could change between the two, and between Stalin and I mean, yeah, of course there was some important differences there. The national differences are probably the most important ones, but at large, the governmental systems were the same near enough.
Yeah, and there's also the factor of the fact that when somebody would move from, say, communism to fascism, or from, say, Nazism to communism, those three ideologies are all revolutionary utopian ideologies, offering revolutionary change to society to bring about that utopia. And so when they switch from one to the other, they're still revolutionaries and they still believe in utopia. It's just the revolution and the utopia that have changed.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, and this is something that really freaks out Fabians and the Frankfurt School and the neocons and the Trotskyites from the neocons, and it's called The Body National. And there was a book I remember reading about it, and this was when they tried to pin down in Nuremberg, like, what is National Socialism? Because they couldn't actually pin it down as an ideology that you could, like a manifesto ideology or anything, like you could say, well, this is what a conservative is, or a traditionalist, or what have you, or socialist. The Body National is a political formula where the masses, the crowd of people, and you'll see it in like Real's propaganda, feed on the words of this leader, who is this incredible charismatic leader, and then he projects that back onto the crowd. And so you have like this really, it's ritualistic. It's a very strange, somewhat scary, but also fascinating performance. It's actually like a stage performance. It's the mix. It's the fusion of politics and stagecraft, in some ways, and that is what that's what frightens a lot of people on the left today, is that sort of thing. Whenever Farage does these big rallies, that's why you have all these like shit-lib Guardian types that always like to say Hitler, or even with Trump back in the day, and now, like it's like a Hitler rally and stuff like that, is because that is their deepest, darkest fear, and that's been their deepest, darkest fear, since 1945.
That, I would say, is one of the key defining things of the great men of history. There's some sort of aura, some sort of magic about them that they can just channel and get people to do anything. You see, like with Napoleon, like flipping an army that's been sent to kill him just by walking up to them. And then Alexander the Great and stuff, all throughout, just something about that.
And I mean, if you look at people like Himmler and Goebbels and stuff, and I've listened to translated, and I've sort of learned a bit of German, so listen to some of their speeches. What's incredible is they are very mediocre people. I mean, Goebbels is just a total. I mean, he sounds. I mean, some of his speeches, he sounds like a Tory politician. He sounds completely weak and tepid. But it's what he's able.
Himmler was a chicken farmer.
Yeah. Himmler was. I mean, Himmler is basically like like Candace Owens in some regards. But the thing there is, because of the crowd and because of that leader, what the crowd projects back onto them, like increases their their charisma and prestige and general being from a propaganda perspective to such a level that they also appear to be like these titan figures. I
definitely
see.
No, it was a chicken farmer, Wood Pit 420 that Himmler was. Look, I mean, I just find all this amusing, and then you get these Guardian guys who almost certainly are Fabians, but they'll quite happily get rid of jury trials in Britain, which is like one of the main safeguards of freedom and against state power, which is why, of course, they want to get rid of it. And I guarantee, we know Keir Starmer is a Fabian, as are most leading members of the Labour Party, and as Arron has been pointing out on this stream, they always have been, going right back to the 1920s. So, I'm just conscious we're wandering a bit from the subject. I mean, look, I'd like to make it clear, I detest the Fabian Society, and I would ban it if I had half a chance. I don't know if Arron feels as strongly as I do on that, but that's my view on it. I would just ban it completely because they're arseholes and they have done more damage to this country than any other group I can think of, to be honest.
I wouldn't ban them. I do think they have done a great deal of damage. My big issue with the Fabian Society is the fact that there has rarely ever been an attempt on the right to oppose them. So I mentioned that in the 30s, the Conservatives tried to do that. They did that with, I think it's called Ashurst College.
Ashurst College, that's right, yeah.
And they tried to set that up as a sort of a place to build a sort of anti-Fabian society. And also the Conservative Research Department set up in the late 20s.
I believe also the Rosemary League they were more like, they sort of started as like this bizarre quasi paramilitary, but then wanted to be somewhat Fabian. I think the closest thing would maybe be the Monday Club.
Yes, and they did, and actually in the 60s and 70s, they come very close to that. I think half of Heath's, I can't remember exactly how many it is, but a good proportion of Heath's ministers, and including cabinet ministers, are members of the Monday Club. But the big issue we have on the right is that because the Conservative Party is by its nature not ideological, it only ever uses ideological organisations. So the Monday Club would be one of them when it needs to, and it sort of tosses them away when it doesn't. I've got to say one thing I do think that we might have a sort of anti-Fabian society now is Restore Britain under Rupert Lowe. That has a really good chance of being a sort of counter-Fabian society.
What I would say is I don't want. I want these people to be in full view. I want more sunlight shot in their direction. So if Restore Britain or even the Reform Party could shine a light on this organisation, because I don't think the normies know about it,
No, they don't.
and to get any kind of traction out of anything, you kind of need the normies to know. You need your auntie who doesn't know anything about politics to know about them.
Yeah, and actually they could do that very easily, because one of the things, as I've said already, the Labour Party and the Fabian Society have a very close relationship. And Tony Blair and New Labour comes from the Fabian Society. The young Fabians are the people who are instrumental in getting Blair elected leader in '94, and the Fabian Society is the talking shop for New Labour. For example, Ed Balls, who is Gordon Brown's right-hand man during the New Labour years, he writes a book which is called, writes a discussion paper, amongst other things, advocating the independence of the Bank of England in the early 90s. And that is one of the first things that Gordon Brown, for the Fabian Society, one of the first things Gordon Brown does when he's Chancellor is announce the independence of the Bank of England. That the Fabian Society is what produces, in many cases, New Labour. And so when Reform said they're going to produce a great repeal bill, and Rupert Lowe is advocating, the various things Rupert Lowe is advocating through Restore Britain, it is absolutely, this is the Fabian Society's work. And they could quite easily say, yes, this is New Labour. And New Labour got these ideas for New Labour came from the Fabian Society. So you could very easily bring this up to people and show exactly what the Fabian Society influence on the Labour Party is.
I just want to address Lowe for Sheffield here. Like, if Lowe doesn't know about me, I have a lot of scepticism about Reform, but there are some little things that Reform could do which wouldn't stretch them.
You're talking about hope, basically.
Yes. Well, it's sort of like there's lots of things that Reform say they'll do which I don't believe they'll do, like actively reducing immigration to the point where it needs to be. But a little thing like shining a light on the Fabian Society, I think that's something they could do. I think that's quite plausible for Reform to do. Outside of things like that, I wouldn't hold much hope about Reform.
Yeah.
You just got to take the little wins where you can when it comes to Reform.
Yeah.
Well, you're no more dubious about Reform than I am, Mercy. Look, I'm going to vote for them in the next election, because who the hell else can you vote for? I mean,
it's one of those. It's the Reform, the best of the sexually transmitted diseases, is really what you're voting for.
Yeah. I mean, look, if they stop mass immigration, which I doubt, if they do, good. If they start mass deportations, even with just the illegal economic migrants that come across on small boats, that's a start. It's better than what we've got now. But I mean, to my mind, you've got to destroy the Uni Party, which is Labour and Conservatives, and also the Lib Dems and the Greens. If you can destroy the Uni Party, something else may come up. That's what I hope, anyway.
Yeah, it's very much you've got to expect the very least from the Reform Party, but if you can think of a little thing that Reform might be able to do, like shine a light on the Fabian Society for normies.
I tell you what, I mean, you're completely correct, Mercy, and the public don't know bugger all about the Fabian Society, which is why we're doing this stream. I very much doubt if most people have even heard of it. But I mean, there are other groups like Common Purpose, etc., which are well worth looking into and are actually more secretive than the Fabians. So,
when you look at the Fabian Society and how their whole thing is, we've established this, they subvert the subversion, right? You could, if you were to apply that same thing against them and let's say the left the political left in Britain. Well, the one way that you could do that is you basically, currently in the moment you've got Labour hemorrhaging to Greens, you've got independent, left-wing, Pakistani interest group political organisations. You have like this fracturing at the seams. I would say, you would encourage the left to get violent. For me, I would be saying, well, you need to. If the left got violent, if they started enacting violence, and this may be a bit of a topic you wouldn't want to really talk about, but if the left started getting violent, that would the right would win for generations. That would be a sure way of bringing it down.
I mean, they have.
I think the left are already getting violent and have been violent for some time. To be honest with you.
In America, they've already gone very violent. There,
Well,
but
they've been pretty violent in Britain with Antifa
I know,
and Black Lives Matter and all these
in America,
Palestinian Muslims, etc.
Yeah, but America has actual political assassinations from them. Yeah, it needs like the right person to take advantage of it, really. And
if you back in, of course, back in the 70s, you had various groups like the Black Panthers and the Weathermen Underground, and you saw left-wing political violence, which in some ways was worse then than you have now. Definitely worse than than now. And as a result, you had Nixon. But the thing was, what made it bad was the left realized, and they basically purged all their sort of toxic elements, and they were able to rebrand, something different. But you're right. At the end of the day, the left is always called violent. They always will resort to violence, intimidation, and that still happened. But their more toxic extremist wing, they purge. What I'm saying is a right-wing Fabian Society, or like Rupert Lowe's thing and everything. You want to have it so the left is constantly fractured, constantly distrustful of each other, and always believing. I mean, one thing that these revolutionary groups that we're talking about is their propensity for paranoia. That they are incredibly paranoid people. They always fear that there's the enemy within. That's one thing they always fear about. That there is like people who work within their organizations that will work against them, and that's something to play on because they are the best at self-sabotaging themselves at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I think Key Buckley makes a good point that I put up here. The Fabians are not revolutionary. What they're about is boiling the frog slowly, and that's what they've always been about. And they've been doing it since the 1880s, which of course is exactly what Arron's been talking about.
Yeah, they want to purge the sort of freaks that William's talking about, who give them a really bad look. So
that's what I mean. We need to
encourage the freaks.
You have to make it so the Fabian Society can't like manage. I mean, they operate as a managing, they're like a PR system for the left, and you need to make it so that they can no longer, they can't sort of like shine that turd anymore, effectively.
Yeah.
Arron, would have you got stuff you want to say about the Fabian Society more recently and that kind of stuff?
Actually, with the Fabians, in addition to being very much behind New Labour, Fabian Society is very much where Starmer comes from. As well as being a member, he published an essay which was published by the Fabian Society in, I think, 2021, essentially setting out what was Starmerism. And that is very much that is something that's been debated through the Fabian Society. It's this government, as with New Labour, is very much a product of thinking within the Fabian Society and sort of the members of the government, particularly the senior members like Starmer and Morgan McSweeney, being very much a part of the Fabian Society, and they're discussing it. In fact, the one interesting thing about the Fabian Society is that they were actively they've been sort of involved in this sort of thing that they've been advocating the idea. I might have brought it up before when we were on sort of Splendid Isolation streams. This idea of a grand coalition of the left, that Labour, to try and shut anybody else out, should form a progressive coalition with the Lib Dems and maybe occasionally the Scottish Nationalists. They've been pushing that since about 2017. And so if we do see that, if you see that idea of a progressive alliance really coming to sort of any real semblance of strategy in say the next say 3 years, that itself is directly from the General Secretary of the Fabian Society, Andrew Harrop, who produced a report in early 2013 advocating that. So this current government is very much a Fabian socialist government in the modern iteration of Fabian socialism.
And of course, we've already talked about the fact that Khan from London is
Yes.
a Fabian. And so, of course, that's going to pull in your so-called moderate Muslims and what have you as well, yeah. Guys, do you chaps have final questions for Arron on this, or other things you want to talk about?
Go on.
I'd say it does seem like the freaks, like William was talking about, they seem to be more on the ascendant these days. Like they're really just retarded freaks that the Fabians try to keep under wraps. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I've got a statement and a question. So I'll start with a statement. I was thinking about why normies don't know about them, because, as you say, they are in full view. But it brings into mind a device from Doctor Who, how people don't notice the TARDIS. There's something on the TARDIS called the perception filter, i.e., you can see the TARDIS, but you don't notice the TARDIS. I feel like there's a perception filter over the Fabian Society. And what I was hoping, when I came up with the idea of if reform could shine a light, I was hoping I could break the kind of perception filter on the Fabian Society. Because I think, if you want to use that analogy, there's a lot of perception filters over a lot of organisations globally, quite frankly, that we could do with breaking the perception filter on. And my question is just for the amusement of Iron Duke. So I'll ask it. Where do the Fabians feel about cars? What do they feel about cars?
Well, at the moment they're very much they're the sort of green. They're into the green stuff, so they're not fans. I couldn't tell you what their attitude was historically, to be honest. I think
big pushes the net zero these days, for sure.
Yes. So historically, I don't think they had a particular view on cars.
And tangentially,
they must be very anti-car now, though.
Yes.
Yeah, they're very much net zero now. But also, Mercy, and if you looked back, Arron's been talking about they were quite a lot behind the push for nationalisation, etc. So when you look at all the British car manufacturers being amalgamated into the mess that became British Leyland, they would have had something to do with that for sure.
Interesting. Well, I've always said British Leyland were a quasi-communist organisation. Although socialist in this case.
Didn't the budget today bring in like a pay-per-mile tax for electric cars?
Yeah, 3p a mile.
Right. So yeah, it's like even the electric cars they're not going to let you get away with anymore.
Well, this kind of brings me on to a more serious point. How long have they been about control and digital ID and things of that nature?
I would say since the New Labour days. So, for example, as previously mentioned, it's the proposed abolition of trial by jury for most crimes. That was something that they tried to bring in under Gordon Brown during his final years. So it wouldn't be. And you've also had this sort of ID card thing that New Labour tried to bring in 2007, but they failed. So this is stuff that goes back, let's say, at least 20 years.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's the Fabians exactly, but they seem hell bent on this idea that we should be all tracked. And I mean, my sort of conspiratorial
it is them, Mercy, and they absolutely are pushing the digital ID and facial recognition cameras and all of this stuff. That's all Fabian Society. But I mean, as Arron has been saying, Starmer is like an absolute creation of Fabian Society.
It's also about, you know, as I said, the Fabian Society, they operate as you know, filtering the left. But one thing you do have in this system is how do you crack down on dissidents? Now, people like us on this show, and you know, people like watching, you know, they'll know who we are. They know who you are watching. They'll know that information. And yes, on the grand scheme of things, we are a minority, and it would be easy for them to crack down. But the problem is, you know, they're a minority as well, and their power is, and I don't know if Arron would agree with this. The Fabians, I mean, Arron, actually, I'll just ask you this: do you think the Fabians are as influential as they are now than they were, let's say, 60, 70, 80 years ago?
I would say not so much, not as much. They still have a degree. They still are influential, but nowhere near as much. So, for example, the Fabians are in the interwar period. They're advising pretty much the government, whether it's a Labour government or not. Whereas the Fabian Society now is very much only able to do anything if the Labour Party is in power.
Yeah, and so and you know, with the advent of the internet, and you know, things like what I do and what Iron Duke does, and countless other people, communication, political theories, ideas, and the connection to like the mass people, you know, it I think really is, and this is why they have obsession with you know, like the digital. I actually think it's because of like online control, online harms bill, as Morgoth has talked about, and many others. It's because the internet, again, is a massive, massive problem for people on the left, and probably for the Fabian Society. I mean, they've talked about like I remember a few years ago, the Fabian Society referred to the internet as like this wild west, this you know, uncontrolled wild west that needs to be brought back into civilization. And and same as well as Tony Blair Institute, you know, used that line as well.
The latest one, William, is that getting rid of trial by jury. I mean, you know, if they want to restrict trial by jury basically to murder, manslaughter, and rape, which would mean...
and also, and not just that, but also what the state decides is important crimes that the public would be interested in.
When you look at this getting rid of trial by jury, you've got to remember the Labour Party have basically already got rid of magistrates. And magistrates used to be volunteers who were not paid by the government. I'm not saying they were always fair, because they weren't, but they weren't paid by the government. Whereas now you get a judge who is paid by the government and basically can be sacked by the government if the judge doesn't rule in the way the government wants them to rule.
Yeah. And you have a
trial by jury is something that's a hill we should all die on.
But what I mean, the thing is also on that is it's ridiculous. You'll have a judge who is paid by the state. You're basically like a establishment judge. You'll have a crown prosecutor who is also paid by the state, and you'll have some sort of defense lawyer, and of course, every decision. I mean, you're going to have very successful conviction rates, or in other cases, maybe depending on who the perpetrator is, what their background is. But it's going to the numbers will reveal themselves, and you're going to have a lot of people. You have a lot of innocent people who will go to prison, and a lot of people who are guilty avoid prison.
So depending on their ethnic background to a large degree, from what we have seen so far.
And also
because of course there's already there are already guidelines in court cases that people from ethnic minority groups in Britain get lesser sentences. We already have a 2-tier system, but if you get rid of trial by jury, and don't forget the British system is, if you want to go for a jury trial, you can insist on one at the moment, but Labour wants to get rid of that. And as Arron pointed out, that is absolutely a Fabian Society policy.
I saw one, and I think this guy, there's this, I mean, we talked about people in the Conservative Party who are Fabians. There is one person who I know is a quote-unquote member of the Conservative Party. I don't know if he is. I think he lies about it on Facebook and everything. But regardless, his argument in favour of this is, do you remember the statue of Colston and that being torn down and thrown in the river?
Mm-hmm.
Those involved who were arrested for vandalism went to trial, and basically what they did was the judge instructed the jury effectively. They've admitted it. They don't deny it. You have to find them guilty of, they've pleaded guilty. You have to find them guilty of criminal damage, vandalism, etc. And the jury didn't. And so they're free to go. Now, what they don't tell you is behind the scenes, the jury with the media and other groups worked to put pressure, along with an activist historian who the judge allowed to turn up and give a lecture in court, to basically harass and harangue jury and jury family members in court and outside of court. And this is well documented by people at the time. And this has been used as an example of why we should do that, because in this instance, it didn't work. Well, the reason it didn't work is because left-wing terrorists were able to harass and borderline threaten jurors, and the judge himself was a left-wing terrorist, along with the local police and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been used. I'm seeing that being used as an example. And so, if you guys see it being used as an example going forward, remember that, because that was. I remember thinking at the time, I can see shitheads in the future use this as an example to get rid of jury trials.
Yeah. It's
as people have pointed out, jury trials are an ancient English and British right, and they are an absolute bulwark against government corruption and state abuses of power. We should never accept getting rid of jury trials.
Absolutely, but as I've said on previous streams, I am worried that the jury is going to be a jury of our peers.
Yeah.
That's always
that's another issue. But I mean, if you're like me, for example, and I think some of us here, if not all of us, we're in favor of ending mass third-world immigration, and I think most of us are in favor of deportations, and remigration. I'm certainly in favour of remigration. You know, Steve Laws
certainly.
speaks absolute sense as far as I'm concerned on that
Mhm.
issue, and that's an issue which would solve itself eventually.
Oh yeah, but in the interim, though, it's what my concern is.
I mean, like
Well,
the O.J. Simpson trial was a great example of this. Because the prosecution thought, okay, we've got loads of women, but they're all black women, and they were thinking, well, they'll side with the woman, but no, they didn't, and they just based, well, O.J.'s one of us, so he's innocent. So that.
yeah. I mean, like, let's be honest. If I got arrested in Tower Hamlets for
Oh,
inciting racial hatred,
hmm.
I'm going down.
Yeah.
I'm going down. I'm not. There'll be no. I could have.
Obviously that would be true of all of us. Absolutely, certainly. Arron, this has mostly been your stream. So, what's your final thoughts on this stuff?
I'm pretty glad I've done this stream because I'm glad that people now will understand what the Fabian Society is. There's not a secret society, and they're not here hiding anything. They're very public about what they do, and also because they're very public, it's all out there. If you put the Fabian Society into Google, their website will come up, and you can see exactly what they think, and you can see a very quite detailed history of the society itself, and people. Everything there for you to learn about the Fabian Society is in many cases provided by the Fabian Society itself. So, and they are honest about what they want, and so you can, to a degree, trust what they are they're putting out. And so, the more people learn about the Fabian Society, the better things will be for us, especially in general, but especially on that side.
Yeah. So if anyone has links with the Reform Party, can nudge in that direction. Because I think that's something I could do, because it doesn't take any effort. Once I've shone a light into it, it's like a rolling stone. It'll have its own momentum. They don't even need to do any policies around it.
Yeah. It's just like all these politicians who've done all these things you hate. Look at what they all have in common.
Yeah.
I think also
very true. Yeah.
One thing you can learn from the Fabian Society, and there's not that many, but one thing you can learn is if you have a line. So, and you mentioned remigration. You'll have people on the right and centre right who'll say, and I've seen them, they'll undermine the message. They'll say, well, what about my sort of Nigerian, Bangladeshi, Nepalese, Portuguese friend, and everything like that, and various other sort of arguments. And it's like, no, clear line on this matter, and so on and so forth. And that's what the Fabians, the Fabians and people on the left do, is that they do have these clear lines. And we say, oh, this policy they're pushing now, is ridiculous. Well, the ridiculous policy now will probably come into effect maybe in 20 years' time. I mean, could you imagine 20, 30 years ago, saying to the British public back then about abolishing jury trials? I mean, it wouldn't
have flown for a second. Flown for a second.
And now it's I'm not seeing many people. I mean, there are people outraged, but it's not. It's been normal. It's been normalized.
We'll certainly be talking about this on Saturday on our normal politics stream. We'll be talking about Labour wanting to get rid of jury trials. This is not the right time to do it too much. Let me have a look at our entropy thing. I think we've only got one. Rong Tao Wu sends us $3, and he says, I'm not able to catch it live because I've got an exam later, but I hope you guys are all well. So thank you very much to Rong Tao Wu for that. I would also point out that Gerin sent us $5 last Saturday, and I'm not quite sure if I read that out or not. But he did. Gerin quite often supports the channel, and so thank you, Gerin, for that as well. All right. We are going to be.
Oh.
I don't know what next week's history stream is going to be yet. I'm waiting for people to give me suggestions. So we don't know what that's going to be yet. It'll be something interesting, hopefully. I'm just going to say that in December I will be doing another stream of Arron Hook about traditional British Christmases, which are a bit different to traditional American Christmases, and I think Arron wants to bring some of that out because it's a bit different.
Yeah.
I do want to. I found a quote here which probably may be relevant to what the class stuff. This is a Jonathan Bowden quote. Whether they are middle class or working class, whether they are northern or southern, all of our people are ultimately the same nationality. We care for them. We care for our own. And we want our culture and our state and our nation back for us in our own land. I think that should be the mantra of restore and the anti the sort of right wing version of the Fabian
Agreed.
Societies. That is the. I mean, that is it. That is it. You can't make it any clearer than that.
Yeah, totally agree. Look, I don't think any of us on this panel fundamentally disagree with any of that stuff. Anyway, thank you very much to Arron Hook, especially because this was mostly Arron's stream, but also thank you to my guests, Mercian, Fariam, and William Grenville, aka AI. Is there anything any of you? Oh, sorry, Arron, would you like to plug your channel, sir? Sorry.
Oh yeah, thank you, Rick. My channel is Arron James Hook. I review books, but also films and TV shows. I talk about a bit about politics, and I have got a stream coming up next Tuesday, which is where my friend Rod Gilly, who runs a independent publishing house, is going to discuss with me the stuff he's going to have coming out in 2026. So if you're interested in that, particularly if you're a fan of horror and fantasy, you may find something you might want to read. Yeah.
I know you did a stream last week, Arron, on Shelley and Frankenstein, didn't you?
Yes, on Saturday I did one with Bree, who often appears in the chat, about Dracula, and we did discuss Frankenstein, partly because one of the stories that influences Bram Stoker's Dracula was called The Vampire by William Polidori. It was written in the same writing competition that prompted Mary Shelley to write Frankenstein back in 1817, I think it was. No, sorry.
I did catch some of that stream, but I only caught some of it because I had to get ready for my own stream. But I will go back and check it later. But the bit I caught seemed quite interesting. Mercian, Fariam, anything you want to plug?
Yes, you can follow me on my channel. It's doing quite good numbers now. You'll see a lot of current events there when I've got time to do them. And you can follow me on X, Mercian303.
Cool. Fariam, anything?
No, I'm good.
William Grenville, would you like to plug your channel?
Yes. So follow William Grenville, formerly AI Shiratori. If you put both names in YouTube, it will come up with my channel and streams and videos and what have you. I will be promoting in the next couple of weeks soon. You will have probably the greatest art stream panel on the right wing side of things.
Oh, cool.
there.
Yeah, this is the one I'm trying to get Mr. D to join. And he said he may if he's free. So that could be interesting.
Yeah. So far, Arron, I'm Duke, Alexander Adams, who is a published art critique artist himself, very much in the sort of traditionalist right wing. When I say traditionalist, I mean probably that's not the correct term, but sort of right wing, maybe somewhat reactionary, and traditionalist in the sense of concepts of beauty and what have you, but also modernist and new, if that makes sense. He's like a not afraid to embrace the modern world and things, but through a traditional lens. And also Nathan Hood and stuff. So we've got some really potential heavy hitters coming on for this panel.
Looking forward to that, William. I think that should be a good stream. And of course, in part, it because we're going to pick some of our favourite British artists, and in part, it's an answer to Carl Benjamin and his trashing of British art in favour of the Italians. So partly it's
he sees a bit of he sees a Medici commission piece, and he throws away Britain's cultural heritage on the fly. No, I mean, to be honest, I think I think Carl probably didn't mean it in the sense that he did, and probably realised it was a bit of a silly off the cuff remark. But
yes,
that mentality, though, is prevalent though in a lot of British people, unfortunately. So we're going to put a stop to that. We'll put a stop to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that stream, and when we know a little bit more information, I'll put it up on my on YouTube on the post section, and obviously on X as well. We'll be back on Saturday, people, with Splendid Isolation, our normal politics and current affairs stream, where we will certainly be talking about two-tier care wanting to get rid of jury trials, amongst other things. Also, probably we'll mention the farmers' protests in London, which the Metropolitan Police banned and started arresting farmers. Didn't do that with Black Lives Matter or Palestinians or anything else, but they did do it to British farmers.
Well, that's how you know. That's how you know a protest is real, when it gets banned.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. And also, of course, we will have some words to say about the woman from Accounts' budget. So we'll probably talk about that a bit as well, amongst other things. So yeah.
Will we be mansplaining to her?
Yes, most
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
You just need to be shouting across the hall at her. Don't cry. What was it Trump tweeted? Don't cry in the casino. Don't cry in front of the bankers.
Yeah. I liked it when Trump called that reporter Piggy, because she kept interrupting him. He said in the end, he said,
I heard her name's just Peggy.
No.
People misheard it.
No, he did absolutely call her Piggy. I watched it on video, and it was because she kept interrupting him. She was being rude. But yeah, it was funny. Trump's funny. I don't always agree with Trump, but he is funny. All right, guys. Thank you again to Arron Hook, Thariam Mercian, and William Grenville. And we'll see you on Saturday. Also, I've got a tune to play us out with, which I rather like. So hang on. Where are we? There we go. See if this works. Bum, 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 bum. Right.
When first I went to soldier with cowboys, oh, and when I walked abroad, all the pretty girls would wink at me. The ladies can't resist the jolly soldier. Bang upon the big drum, clash upon the cymbals. We'll sing as we go marching along, boys, along. And although on this campaign there's no whiskey or champagne, still we'll keep our spirits flowing with the song, boys. Now when we got up the route and for India we set out, the girls were crying round us to the docks, boys, oh. So we gave 3 hearty cheers for the pretty little dears, in the hopes they've each one got another soldier. Bang upon the big drum, clash upon the cymbals, we'll sing as we go marching along, boys, along. And although on this campaign there's no whiskey or champagne, still we'll keep our spirits flowing with a song, boys. Then we marched from Chalazan and we met the wild Afghan and made him at Karasia for the run, boys, oh. And we marched into Kabul and we took the Bala Hizar and we made them to respect the British soldier. Bang upon the big drum, clash upon the cymbals, we'll sing as we go marching along, boys, along. And although on this campaign there's no whiskey or champagne, still we'll keep our spirits flowing with a song, boys. And now I'll say goodbye, for I'm feeling rather dry, and I see a comrade waiting with his song, boys, oh. So here's good luck to all, and promotion soon and better money. That's the sort of ticket for a soldier. Bang upon the big drum, clash upon the cymbals, sing as we go marching along, boys, along. And although on this campaign there's no whiskey or champagne, still we'll keep our spirits flowing with a song, boys.
And that was Bang Upon the Big Drum, which is a song from the Second Afghan War from 1878 onwards. And it's from Patriotic Archive, if you like good music, traditional stuff, military, naval, also some folk songs and that sort of stuff. Go and check out Patriotic Archive's channel. It's very good. Okay, in the meantime, don't let the bastards grind you down, and we'll see you on Saturday, guys. Go well.